And welcome to One Hero a Day, where everyday courage lives on. Like and subscribe to hear a new story each night. The river had always been a place of pause. Along its banks, people walked slowly, their footsteps softer somehow beneath the hush of late afternoon. Trees leaned in toward the water, and the sky, dipped in the golden blue of a fading sun, mirrored quietly on the surface. Children ran ahead of their parents, skipping stones. A gentle breeze rustled through leaves like the whisper of something old and watchful. No one expected the quiet to be broken. Among the walkers that day was a man. His name, not important to those around him just yet, was just one of many unknowns along the river path. He wore worn shoes, the kind molded by years of labor, and his gait suggested a long day's work behind him. But there was something in the way he looked at the water, not distracted, not hurried, like someone who had learned to listen to what the river did not say. On the opposite bank, a child laughed. The voice rang clear, bright and fearless. Moments later, a splash. At first, it was dismissed as play. Children were always testing boundaries near the water's edge. But then, a pause. The laughter stopped. Then came the scream. A woman's voice, raw, panicked, shattered the air. Heads turned, breath caught. And there, just beyond the shoreline, was a small girl, maybe 7 or 8, her arms flailing, her head barely above the current. The river, now no longer still, seemed to pull her deeper with each passing second. People froze. A few cried out. Some stepped forward instinctively, but stopped short at the edge, unsure, afraid, too shocked to move. Time dilated. The seconds stretched impossibly wide. But the man, the one with tired shoes and the silent walk, did not hesitate. He didn't speak. He didn't look around for help or think twice. In one swift movement, he kicked off his shoes, tore away his jacket, and sprinted toward the river's edge. The grass beneath his feet was wet and uneven, but he moved like a man who had already made peace with whatever came next. Then, he jumped. The splash wasn't loud. It was clean, almost quiet, like the river had been expecting him. His body disappeared into the water, sending only a gentle spray upward, and then silence again. From the bank, eyes followed the ripples. No one moved. Breath held, hearts heavy with fear and awe. Beneath the surface, the world shifted. The cold was immediate, sharp, punishing, like thousands of pins piercing the skin all at once. But the man didn't flinch. His eyes opened underwater, scanning through the murky swirl of movement and light. Somewhere ahead, maybe 6 or 7 feet out, a small figure sank unevenly beneath the surface, pulled down by the slow, invisible weight of panic. He pushed forward with everything he had, arms sweeping wide, legs churning against the drag. His chest burned from the shock of the cold, but he kept his focus fixed, never breaking from that narrow line of intent between him and the child. The girl was losing her rhythm now. The desperate thrashing of moments ago had slowed. Her limbs were heavier, her head bobbing lower each second. He could see the outline of her shirt catching water, ballooning and pulling her downward. The river, steady and silent, didn't care. It had no malice, but no mercy either. He reached her just as her body slipped beneath the surface again. One arm shot forward, his hand grasped at what he could, the thin fabric of her sleeve, a wrist slick and trembling. He pulled hard, bringing her closer, cradling her head above water with his forearm. Her eyes were open but dazed. She gasped once, a jagged, shallow intake of breath that gave him a jolt of hope. With his free arm, he began the slow turn back toward shore. But swimming with one arm while holding another human being is no small feat. The current had drifted them farther than he'd realized. His muscles screamed in protest as he kicked, and kicked again, forcing the water to obey. On the bank, someone shouted, "They're there! I see them!" The crowd had grown, drawn by the scream, by the splash, and now by the sight of one man trying to pull a child from death's door. He was close now, 10 feet, maybe less, when his foot struck something beneath the surface. A submerged rock. He steadied, used it for leverage, and pushed forward one last time. Then, hands. 2 of them reached down, gripping his arms, tugging, lifting. He felt himself being pulled. The girl's small body lifted gently from his grasp and into someone else's. She was laid down on the grass. People surrounded her, some crying, some calling out. A man dropped to his knees to check her breathing. A woman knelt to hold her hand. The man who had jumped lay on his side now, coughing violently, water spilling from his lungs. His chest rose and fell in ragged heaves. His hands were shaking. Someone covered him with a jacket. Another passed him a bottle of water, which he refused. The girl coughed. Once. Twice. And then, like a miracle pulled from the riverbed, she cried. A hoarse, shivering sound, but unmistakably alive. The mother collapsed into her daughter's arms. The father's hand trembled as it found her back, unsure of whether to weep or speak. And the man, the one who'd brought her back, said nothing. He sat upright, his shirt clinging to his chest, dripping water like a slow metronome onto the soil. His eyes watched the girl for a long time. He didn't smile. He just breathed. The crowd began to speak again, softly, tentatively. Someone said he was a hero. Another asked his name, but he didn't answer. He stood, legs unsteady but firm, and looked once more at the river. The current flowed on. The ripples were already smoothing out. The surface, once disturbed, had returned to its usual calm, like it never held anyone at all. And yet, for the man who jumped, for the girl who nearly didn't return, and for those who witnessed it, the river had changed. The sun slipped lower in the sky. The breeze was colder now. But in the fading light, there was something else too. A quiet truth, unspoken but deeply felt, that sometimes, in the most ordinary moments, someone will rise. Someone will run toward the danger. Someone will not wait to be told what matters. They will just know, and they will jump. The man's name was Min. No one at the riverbank that day knew it. No one asked, and he never offered it. But in a small neighborhood nearby, in a rented room above a mechanic's shop, Min was just a face people recognized. Not because he stood out, but because he blended in. He had lived in the city for almost 6 years, working odd jobs. Nothing permanent, nothing stable. A shoulder that carried bags of rice in the mornings, and in the evenings, repaired old bicycles when the shop owner let him use the space. He kept to himself mostly, spoke softly when spoken to, smiled with his eyes more than his mouth. Min didn't think of himself as brave. He didn't think of himself as anything, really. Just a man moving through life, one careful step after another. But that night, after he left the riverside with wet clothes clinging to his skin and a chill burrowed deep into his bones, something inside him shifted. He walked home barefoot, his shoes still left behind at the river's edge. The streets glistened faintly under streetlights. His jacket, given by a stranger, hung loosely around his shoulders, still damp. A car passed by, then another. No one stopped him. No one knew where he had been. Back at the small rented room, Min took off the jacket and laid it gently over the back of a chair. He peeled away the wet shirt, shivering now, and stood still for a moment, his bare chest rising and falling. His reflection in the dusty mirror by the door showed a man no different than any other day. Tired, quiet, alone. He didn't turn on the light. Instead, he sat on the edge of his thin mattress, letting the darkness settle around him like an old friend. His hands, still trembling slightly, rested on his knees. The room was quiet except for the occasional honk from a distant street. And then he remembered the girl's eyes. Not when she was drowning, but just after. When she lay on the grass, coughing, and their eyes met briefly through the blur of water and light. She hadn't spoken. She didn't need to. That moment, that look, was enough. Min bowed his head. Not in prayer, not in weariness, just something in between. The next morning, he woke early. The sun had barely touched the windowsill. He dressed in silence, pulled on a different shirt, and made his way to the bike shop. He nodded to the owner, who offered him a cup of hot tea and a raised eyebrow. Not asking, but knowing something was different. Min didn't speak about what had happened. Not to the shop owner, not to the neighbors, not even to himself. He simply wiped his hands on an old towel, picked up a wrench, and got back to work. But word had already begun to spread. Someone at the river had taken a video, blurry, distant, but clear enough to show the leap, the struggle, the pull from the water. It had been shared that evening, quietly at first, then widely. People began to ask, who was he? Where did he go? Min had no idea his name was being searched. He didn't own a smartphone. He used a small, cracked keypad phone with no camera and barely working battery. He had no social media, no way to see the comments, the messages, the news headlines calling him the riverbank hero. But even without the internet, something started changing. People at the corner store looked at him longer. A child pointed once as he walked by. The woman who sold bread gave him an extra piece, said nothing, and simply smiled. Min didn't feel like a hero. He hadn't planned it. He hadn't even thought about it. In the moment, it had just happened. But still, that night, after the shop closed, Min sat under the same small light by his bed and stared at the ceiling. He remembered the weight of her body in the water, light but heavy with fear. He remembered the taste of river water in his mouth, the way his muscles had ached. He remembered how cold her skin had felt, and how he had been terrified, deep inside, of not reaching her in time. And yet he had jumped. Not because he believed he would succeed, not because he wanted to be seen, but because in that one heartbeat, that blink between witnessing and deciding, he knew he couldn't just watch. There were no medals for that kind of moment. No script, no certainty. Just one man, one leap, and a river that for a moment bore witness to something unspoken but unforgettable. The next few days unfolded like ordinary time does. Slow, familiar, filled with small moments that tried to act as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But the current beneath the surface had changed. Not just in Min, but in the quiet network of lives that unknowingly orbited around that single act by the river. At the neighborhood cafe near the crossroads, the regulars had begun talking. Not loudly, not sensationally, but with a kind of quiet reverence, the way people talk about someone they didn't quite notice until they did something unforgettable. He works at that old bike place, doesn't he? The one with the oil stains on his hands. I heard he didn't even wait for an ambulance. Just walked away, soaking wet like it was nothing. Someone placed a printed screenshot of the video by the register. A blurry still of the moment Min surfaced with the child in his arms. The image was rough, the pixels smudged with motion, but the message was clear. Someone had jumped when no one else did. Meanwhile, at the small clinic near the hospital, the girl was recovering. Her name was Lynn. She was 7 years old, with a quiet disposition and a fondness for collecting shiny stones. Her mother stayed by her bedside, her hands never far from her daughter's. Her father paced more often than he sat, speaking in low tones to nurses, asking again and again, "Can we find him? Can we thank him?" But no one could find Min. Not yet. He had no digital trail, no name attached to the clip. The shop where he worked wasn't on social media. To the outside world, the man who had saved Lynn might as well have vanished into the mist. Yet back in his workshop, Min remained unchanged. He tuned a set of brakes, wiped grease from a chain, adjusted a saddle for a customer who never looked up from his phone. Life went on, just as it had before. But he felt it, the difference. Children who passed by looked at him a second longer. An old man offered him a warm can of tea with a slight bow. Even the air seemed quieter, more aware of his movements. Min didn't seek it, didn't want it, but it followed him all the same. That evening, as the sun stretched low across the rooftops, Min sat alone in the small alley behind the shop. He held a bowl of rice and fish, steam rising into the dimming light. Across the way, two boys kicked a soccer ball, their voices loud and full of energy. And then one of them called out, not to Min, but about him. "That's him, isn't it? The guy from the river? Really? That's him? I think so. My mom showed me the video." Min looked up, caught their gaze for a moment, and offered a gentle nod. He didn't smile, not quite, but something softened in his face. The boys hesitated, then ran off again, laughter chasing their footsteps. He returned to his food, eating slowly, thoughtfully. Up in the hospital room, Lynn finally spoke her first full sentence since the incident. Her voice was quiet, raspy from the water that had filled her lungs. "He held my hand," she whispered to her mother. "He didn't let go." Her mother wept quietly at those words, not out of grief, but from something else. Something like grace. That night, Lynn dreamed of water again. But it wasn't scary this time. The river in her dream shimmered with soft light, and in the distance, a man stood on the shore, not speaking, not moving, just watching to make sure she was safe. Meanwhile, Min washed his hands at the outdoor sink behind the shop. The water was cold. His palms, rough from work, glistened for a moment before he dried them on his shirt. He looked at them, the same hands that had held a child's wrist, that had fought the current, that had pulled a life back into the world. And he wondered, not aloud, just in thought, how many hands had once held him in the same way, quietly, without ceremony. He didn't know, but he hoped there had been at least one. He turned off the tap. The drip-drip of the water echoed into the quiet. Behind him, the alley was dark now, but ahead, somewhere down the street, someone had lit a small candle near the sidewalk, a tiny flicker in the wind. Min walked toward it, slowly, his steps steady. The night closed in gently around him, not with fear, but with a kind of deep, watchful silence. And the river, a few blocks away, still flowing, remembered everything. The next morning began like any other. Early light filtered through the metal shutters of the bike shop, throwing long strips of pale gold across the dusty concrete floor. Min was already there, wiping down tools, his movements calm, practiced. The rhythm of work was something he trusted. The click of a wrench, the hiss of air from a tire valve, the soft scrape of cloth on chain. But today, something broke that rhythm. It started with a knock on the side door, soft, hesitant. Min looked up. The shop wasn't open yet. He wiped his hands, walked over, and opened it slowly. Outside stood a man and a woman. The man was holding a bouquet of white lilies. The woman clutched a child's hand, small, familiar. It was Lynn. She wore a clean white sweater, her hair still damp from a morning bath. Her eyes, clear and steady now, searched Min's face as if to confirm what she already knew. Her mother was the first to speak. Her voice was quiet, but full of something Min had heard only once before, in the cry of a mother watching her child slip beneath the water. "You saved our daughter," she said. "We've been looking for you." Min didn't answer right away. He looked down at Lynn, who stepped forward and held out something in her palm. A small stone, polished smooth. It caught the light, flashing faint colors across her fingers. "I found it yesterday," she said. "It's lucky." Min took the stone gently, held it for a moment, and then crouched down so he was eye level with the girl. "You're very brave," he said, his voice low. She nodded. The parents stepped closer. The man offered the lilies, his hands shaking slightly. "We don't have the words," he said, "but thank you, from all of us, for everything." Min took the flowers, unsure of where to place his hands, how to respond. He wasn't used to being thanked. Gratitude made him nervous, exposed. He preferred gestures, silent exchanges. "I'm glad she's okay," he said simply. That moment lingered, not long, but long enough for it to settle in everyone's chest. Then Lynn's mother reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. "This isn't enough," she said, "but we wanted to help. Anything you need." Min stepped back slightly, his brows knit together, hesitant. He looked at the envelope, thick, sealed, and then at the girl. "I didn't do it for that," he said. "We know," the father replied. "That's why you deserve it even more." Min paused. A breeze stirred the lilies in his hand. He looked down at the petals, white as river foam, soft as breath. Then slowly, he reached out, took the envelope, and nodded. Not out of pride, not even out of acceptance. Just respect for the act, for the offering, for the feeling behind it. Lynn stepped forward again, and before anyone could stop her, wrapped her small arms around Min's waist. It was brief, a heartbeat-long embrace, but it steadied something inside him. Her mother reached for her hand. "Come on, sweetheart." Lynn gave Min one last look before they turned to leave, her fingers waving gently as they walked down the alley. Min stood there for a long time after they were gone. Later that afternoon, he placed the lilies in a clean glass jar near the shop window. The envelope he tucked away in an old wooden box beneath his bed. But the stone, the small, smooth token of luck that he kept in his pocket, close to his hand. He touched it often in the days that followed. Not for luck, not for magic, but as a reminder of that moment in the river, of the life returned, of what still mattered. Because sometimes you don't need a medal. Sometimes you just need to know that you were there, that you chose not to look away, that you stepped forward when it counted. And sometimes that knowing is enough to carry you through the quiet days that follow. As the sun set that evening, Min stood at the edge of the river once more. This time, not in a rush, not in fear, just watching. The current moved steadily. The water always changing, always the same. He closed his eyes, breathed deeply, and felt something loosen in his chest. Not relief, not pride, just peace. The river had always been there. Long before Min arrived in the city, long before concrete swallowed the fields and wires crossed the sky. It moved with patience, with memory, a silent witness to generations who loved, lost, and lived alongside its banks. And now, it knew Min. He came back often, not every day, but enough for the grass to learn the shape of his footsteps. He never stayed long. He didn't speak to anyone. He would simply stand at the same spot, where the earth dipped near the embankment, and watch the water flow. People began to notice. A young fisherman who cast his net nearby would nod when he saw Min. A woman who jogged along the footpath would slow her pace slightly as she passed him, wondering who he was, feeling the weight of something unspoken in his stillness. And then one afternoon, as a soft rain began to fall, a small group of university students approached him. They had seen the video, all of them. One of them had even written a blog post about it that went mildly viral. They brought with them a camera, a microphone, and a sense of reverence disguised as casual curiosity. "Excuse me, sir. We were hoping... Would you talk to us? Just for a moment?" Min turned, uncertain. "We're making a short film," one of them said, holding up the camera. "About everyday heroes. We want to share your story. People need to hear it." Min didn't move for a while. The rain tapped gently on his shoulders. He looked at the camera, then at the river. "I didn't do it to be known," he said. "I know," the student replied. "That's why it matters." There was silence. Not awkward, just respectful. The kind of pause that allowed the air to settle. Min looked down at his hands, then nodded once. They didn't film him on the riverbank. He asked instead if they could come to the shop the next day. No scripts, no lights, just questions and truth. And so they did. Inside the bike shop, with tools clinking softly in the background and a kettle whistling on a single burner, Min sat on a low stool and spoke. Not fluently, not with perfect phrasing, but with something far more valuable: honesty. He talked about the moment he saw the girl fall in, about the fear that gripped him as he jumped, about the cold that numbed his limbs, and the voice inside him that simply said, "Go." "I didn't think I would make it," he said, "but I couldn't stay on the shore. I couldn't just watch." The students asked gently, respectfully. They didn't prod. They let silence do its work. Min spoke in fragments, small pieces that came together like a puzzle laid out by time. When they asked about his past, he was quiet. He didn't speak of where he came from, or why he was alone, or the years he'd spent drifting between jobs. But he did say this: "I've made mistakes, not big ones, just enough to feel forgotten sometimes. But that day, the river remembered me, or maybe I remembered myself." The room was quiet for a long time after he said that. When the students left, they shook his hand one by one. One of them left a folded note with a simple line written in blue ink. "You reminded me that courage doesn't always shout." The video they made wasn't flashy. No dramatic music. Just Min's voice, his still eyes, his steady hands resting in his lap. They uploaded it to a modest channel and expected a few hundred views at most. But something happened. It spread, slowly at first, then suddenly. People from all over the country began watching, sharing, commenting. There were words like humble, extraordinary, quiet strength, messages poured in from strangers who felt something open in them when they heard his story. And through it all, Min stayed exactly the same. He still woke early, still wiped grease from chains, still walked barefoot across the same cracked tiles at the end of each day. But something had shifted in the way people moved around him. They approached him now not out of awe, but out of recognition. As if, in seeing what he did, they had also seen something in themselves, a potential, a courage, a memory of what it means to act from the deepest, simplest place. Not for applause, not for attention, but because you know you must. That evening, Min returned to the river once more. The sky had turned a deep shade of violet, the last of the sun dipping below the horizon. He sat on a low concrete ledge and reached into his pocket. The small stone Lin had given him was still there, smooth, warm from his hand. He held it up to the fading light. The river moved beside him, quiet and unhurried. A few birds called in the distance. The wind rustled the leaves in the trees above. Min closed his eyes, and for the first time since that day, he allowed himself to feel it. Not the fear, not the weight of the act, but the grace of it. The knowing that in one brief moment, he had been exactly who he needed to be. The seasons began to turn. The air grew heavier with the scent of late summer, ripe fruit, sun-warmed concrete, the faint tang of rust where the river met the old iron rails. Life, as it does, kept flowing forward. But for Min, something had deepened. Not louder, not brighter, just fuller. More people passed through his shop now. Some brought their bicycles. Others came with no bikes at all. Just words. "You're the man from the river, aren't you?" They said it gently, as if approaching a quiet altar. Min would nod, offer them tea, and return to his tools. He never chased conversation, but when it came, he didn't turn it away. One afternoon, a woman arrived with a silver bike. It was an old French frame, polished with care. She looked to be in her 60s, wore a wide straw hat, and carried herself like someone who had seen much of the world. "I don't need a repair," she said softly, setting the bike on its stand. "I just wanted to meet you." Min looked up, his hands covered in chain oil. "My grandson showed me the video," she continued. "I used to swim in that river, you know, as a child, before the bridges were built, before the factories, back when it still smelled like wet stone and jasmine." She smiled, eyes misting. "What you did? It reminded me of a story my father told me, about a fisherman who saved a boy, then disappeared before anyone could thank him." Min listened quietly, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Maybe you're not the only one," she said, placing something on his workbench, an old photograph, yellowing at the corners. It showed a man, waist deep in the river, holding a boy to his chest. "He saved him in '57, she whispered. "I was 5. Min picked up the photo. He studied the man's face. Strong jaw, calm eyes, not so different from his own. The woman stepped back. "Thank you for reminding me that stories never really end," she said. "They just wait to be remembered." When she left, the shop fell into silence again. But Min felt something shift in the air, like the echo of a name he hadn't heard in years. That night, he opened the wooden box beneath his bed. The envelope still sat inside, untouched. But beside it now, he placed the photo, carefully, reverently. He thought of how the river had seen so many lives pass through it. Some saved, some lost, all carried somewhere. And he wondered how many others had stood where he stood, How many had leapt without hesitation, simply because someone had to? He thought of Lynn's hand in his, of the fisherman in the photo, of the way people came now, not to idolize, but to remember. Outside, the sky darkened. Clouds moved like bruises across the horizon. A low rumble of thunder whispered over the rooftops. Min stepped into the alley behind his shop, the stone in his pocket once again warm from the heat of his palm. He looked up at the sky. Rain was coming. But for once, he didn't move to cover anything. He let the first drops fall on his face, his shoulders, his hands, a cleansing rain, the kind that wakes the earth. Somewhere down the street, a child laughed. A radio played an old love song, crackling through static. The scent of fried garlic drifted from a neighbor's open kitchen, and Min stood still in the middle of it all, quiet and steady, letting the rain baptize him into a world that had learned to see him again, not just as the man who jumped into a river, but as the man who stayed, who remained after the applause had faded, who lived on. The rains came harder the next week, turning the city into a low symphony of splashing tires, dripping rooftops, and umbrellas knocking gently against each other in crowded alleys. For most, it was a nuisance. Wet socks, slow commutes, gray afternoons. But for Min, it was something else. It was memory. Rain always reminded him of the river. Not the dramatic moment, not the dive, not the breathless seconds beneath the current, but the stillness after. The quiet, rippling hush of water retreating from the banks. The sound of survival. He found himself listening more to everything. The way the water pooled near the drains, the cadence of voices outside his shop, the echo of footsteps against wet tile. Life had slowed slightly, not stopped, not dulled, just softened. And then, one morning, a boy appeared. He must have been 15, thin, with a wild mop of hair and restless energy leaking from his every motion. He rode up to the shop on a rusting single speed with flat tires and a broken bell. "Are you the river guy?" he asked, not unkindly, just direct. Min looked up from his bench. "I'm Min." The boy nodded. "Yeah, that's you. My uncle says you jumped in without thinking, just went." Min didn't answer right away. He reached for the boy's bike, flipped it gently, and began checking the tires. "Why'd you do it?" the boy asked. Min wiped grease from his fingers. "Wouldn't you?" The boy shrugged. "I don't know. I mean, I'd want to, but I'm not sure I'd move fast enough." There was a pause. "Maybe it's not about speed," Min said quietly. "Maybe it's about deciding before you even know you've decided." The boy nodded slowly, trying to understand. "That sounds hard." "It is," Min said. "But sometimes the body moves before the mind catches up." The boy watched him work. Then, "Can I help?" And just like that, a rhythm began. The boy, whose name turned out to be Koa, showed up the next day. And the next. He wasn't always on time. Sometimes he brought snacks, sometimes he just watched. But Min didn't mind. There was something good about having another pair of hands in the shop, something solid. They rarely spoke about the river. Koa didn't ask again. But sometimes, when they were oiling a chain or straightening a wheel, he would glance at Min with a kind of quiet respect that didn't need to be explained. Min taught him small things: how to find the right balance in a brake line, how to listen to the sound a gear makes when it's almost aligned. Koa learned fast, but more than that, he learned with care. One afternoon, after they had fixed a delivery bike and shared a small lunch of banh mi and iced tea, Koa asked a different kind of question. "Were you ever scared?" he said, not looking up. "Like, really scared?" Min was silent for a moment. Then he set his cup down and said, "Yes, in the water, right after I grabbed her. There was this second, just one, where I thought I might not get out." Koa nodded slowly. "But then," Min continued, "I saw her eyes, and I thought, she's still here, and I'm still holding her, so we're not done yet." Koa didn't say anything, but his fingers tightened around his cup. Something in him shifted. Later that day, as they were closing up, Min gave him a small cloth pouch. Inside was a set of old tools, wrenches, a tire lever, a tiny brass bell. "They were mine when I started," Min said. "Now they're yours." Koa looked up, surprised. "But..." "No buts. Just take care of them, and take care of others when the time comes." The boy nodded, eyes shining just a little. He slung the pouch over his shoulder like a satchel of treasure. As he left that evening, the rain began again, soft and persistent. Min stood at the doorway and watched Koa ride off, slightly hunched, but steadier now. More sure. The world hadn't changed. The river still flowed. The sky still dimmed. But now there was one more person who might not hesitate. One more pair of hands ready to hold on when the water pulls hardest. And that, Min thought, was how it worked. Not with fanfare, not with speeches, just one moment at a time. One young boy learning the rhythm of courage. The shop was quiet again, but in that quiet was something sacred, a passing forward, a quiet echo of a gesture that once saved a life. The following weeks slipped by gently, like pages turning in a worn book. The rain eventually gave way to cooler breezes, and the scent of ripe guava began to drift through the streets, a quiet sign that autumn was near. In the bike shop, life moved in familiar rhythms, chains turning, wheels spinning, tea brewing, and every now and then, laughter floating between silence. Min no longer worked alone. Koa had become part of the space, his chatter filling the empty corners, his questions carving new grooves into Min's routine. But even with the boy's growing presence, Min still returned to the river. Not every day, not at the same time, but often enough that the water remembered him. And on one of those visits, someone else was waiting. She stood near the railing, her hands wrapped around a small thermos. Her hair was shorter now, and she wore a school uniform beneath a loose cardigan. It took Min a moment to recognize her. Lin. She turned as if she'd felt his presence before she saw him. "I was hoping you'd come," she said softly. Min offered a small nod, the way someone might nod to a passing cloud or a memory returned. "I come here sometimes," she added. "Not as often as I should." They stood quietly, side by side, both looking out over the river. The water shimmered beneath the pale sky, carrying reflections that neither of them tried to name. "I remember the color of your shirt that day," Lin said. "It was dark blue, almost black when it got wet." Min glanced down at his hands. "I remember how strong your arms felt," she added, voice barely above the wind. Like being wrapped in safety." Min didn't respond, but his silence was full, not empty. "I wanted to say thank you again," she continued. "Not just for pulling me out, but for staying." Her eyes glistened, though she didn't cry. "I had this idea in my head after it happened, that maybe you'd disappear, that maybe I imagined it. Some man with a quiet face and a fast heart. But then I saw the video. I saw the interviews. I saw the way you still come here." Min looked out across the river. "I don't come to remember that moment," he said. I come because I still feel something when I stand here. What do you feel? He considered it. That the world is wide, that life is thin but strong, that water moves the way memory does, slowly, then all at once. Lynn nodded. I feel that too. A silence settled between them, not awkward, but deep, like they were both listening to something far older than words. Then Lynn reached into her bag and pulled out a notebook, soft leather cover, frayed at the corners. I wrote about it, she said. The river, that day, you. Min hesitated, then took the notebook carefully. You don't have to read it now, she said. I thought maybe one day, when it rains, you'll open it. He held it to his chest. I'm studying literature now, she added, smiling a little. Writing helps me breathe. I fix bikes, Min said. It helps me remember how things fit together. They shared a small laugh, the kind that doesn't rise loud, but glows gently between people who know what it is to be broken and found. Before she left, Lynn turned to him. Do you believe things happen for a reason? Min looked out across the water. I believe sometimes we are exactly where we need to be. She nodded, as if that was enough. As she walked away, Min stayed behind. He opened the notebook just slightly, enough to glimpse a line written in neat, looping script. Courage is not loud. It's the hand that reaches when the world goes quiet. He closed it carefully and placed it in his jacket. The river moved beside him, unbothered, unwitnessed, and alive. A wind stirred the leaves at his feet, and in that moment, Min realized something that didn't need to be said. That a single act, born from instinct and fear and love, had rippled outward in ways he'd never imagined, touching not just the girl he'd saved, but the person she would become. The stories she would write, the lives she would carry with her words. And like the current beneath the bridge, those ripples would move far, far beyond his reach, but not beyond his heart. Koa began arriving earlier now, sometimes even before the shutters were lifted. He'd sit on the curb with a carton of soy milk and a bag of sticky rice, feet bouncing with quiet energy. When Min opened the door, there was always the same greeting. Morning, Ong Min. Sometimes Min would correct him. Not that old yet. But mostly, he just smiled. The boy worked with a kind of growing pride, more careful, more deliberate. He'd started naming the bikes they repaired. This one's Chi Hoa, he'd say, tapping a dented pink cruiser. She's got good bones. Min didn't object. In fact, something about it felt right. As if the bikes, like the people who rode them, carried stories. One afternoon, while wiping grease from his palms, Koa asked without warning, "What would have happened if you hadn't jumped?" Min looked up slowly. The shop had grown quiet. Outside, the sun hung low, painting the alley in long gold shadows. He set the cloth down. Then someone else might have had to. But what if no one did? Min didn't answer right away. Then he said, then we would have lost something precious. Koa nodded, though he didn't press further. Something about the way he asked. It wasn't out of doubt, but reverence. Like he was slowly building an altar in his own mind to the idea of bravery. That night, Min stayed later than usual. He sat at the edge of his bench, the notebook Lynn had given him resting in his lap. He opened it fully this time. The pages were soft, creased from use. Inside were fragments of thought, poetry, moments, half-formed prayers written with trembling clarity. One passage read, I remember the cold first, then the silence, then his arms. They were strong, Yes, but gentle. Like the river wasn't swallowing me, just holding me for one last moment before letting me go. Except it didn't. He didn't, another said. They keep calling him a hero. But heroes don't look at you like that. Like you're worth the risk. Like you're still here. Min closed the book and rested his hand on the cover. A breath left him. Long, slow, unburdening. The word hero still felt too large for his body, but something about those words made it less about him and more about the moment. The choice. The impulse. The weight of a life deciding to meet another halfway. A few days later, a small envelope arrived by post. There was no return address, just a first name. Lynn. Inside was a photograph. Min recognized the angle immediately. It had been taken from the riverbank, perhaps by a bystander in those frantic minutes after the rescue. It showed him wading out, the girl wrapped in his arms, her hair slicked to her face, her eyes wide with life. But what struck him most wasn't the image itself. It was what was written on the back. A single sentence written in Lynn's hand. We are not what we do once. We are what we keep choosing. Min set the photo beside the notebook on his shelf, above the workbench, between the tools and the tea kettle, where it would stay. That weekend, Koa came in carrying a second-hand helmet and a stack of old cycling magazines. Thought I should start learning more, he said. About the people who ride, not just the bikes. Min nodded. That's good. He thought for a moment, then added, the stories matter just as much as the gears. Koa smiled wide. Exactly what I was thinking. The shop had changed, subtly but surely. The dust still gathered. The fans still groaned in the afternoon heat. But something in the air felt lighter, like the place was breathing deeper. One morning, Koa asked if he could paint a sign for the door. Something simple, he said, but true. Min gave him a nod and a brush. By evening, the boy had finished. In small, careful lettering, it read, Min's cycle, for repairs, for stories, for second chances. Min traced the letters with his thumb. Second chances, he whispered. Yes. Outside, the river moved on. Calm, steady, patient. A keeper of secrets, a mirror to the sky. Min stood at the threshold of his shop, watching the light shift across the street, and thought of how the world had turned since that single moment. A dive, a choice, a girl's hand in his, and how everything, somehow, had kept flowing. Autumn deepened its hold on the city, bringing with it the dry rustle of falling leaves and the soft hush of wind weaving through narrow streets. The air grew crisp. Mornings arrived with the scent of warm street-side passerby, and nights settled earlier, folding the town into a kind of thoughtful stillness. Min began riding more. Not far, just from the shop to the market, sometimes to the river, sometimes nowhere in particular. He said it was to test repairs, but really it was something quieter than that. The rhythm of pedaling, the way the tires hummed beneath him. It gave him a sense of peace that nothing else quite did. He liked the feeling of motion without urgency. One evening, as twilight brushed orange across the city, he passed a young girl on a bright yellow bicycle. A blur of movement and laughter, a parent walking beside her. He slowed slightly, just to watch. The girl was wobbling, her tiny hands gripping the handlebars with all her might. And yet, she didn't stop. She laughed when she swerved, squealed when she steadied. Something in her reminded him of Lynn. Not her face, not her voice, but the look of someone tasting life with both awe and defiance. Min smiled, then turned his handlebars gently toward the river. It had been months since the rescue, but some memories lived just beneath the skin, ready to rise with the right light, the right sound. He parked the bike near the same bench he always used and sat with his hands in his lap. The water was calm, the sun nearly gone, and then a familiar voice behind him. "You still visit?" It was Lynn again. She wasn't alone this time. Beside her stood a girl no older than 10, clinging shyly to her side. A cousin, perhaps, or a student. "I do," Min replied. Lynn gestured to the girl. "This is Mai. She wanted to see the river." Mai gave a small bow, her eyes wide. "Are you the one who saved Chi Lin?" Min looked at Lynn. She smiled. He turned back to the girl. "I was just someone standing close enough to try." The little girl blinked, thoughtful. They sat for a while, the three of them. The conversation was quiet, drifting between childhood stories, school days, dreams. Mai said she wanted to become a nurse someday. "I want to help people too," she said matter-of-factly. Min looked at Lynn. There was pride in her face. Not for herself, but for this next voice, this next small courage beginning to grow. As the sun dipped lower, Lynn stood and helped Mai gather her things. "Thank you for this," she said softly. Min nodded. Before she left, Lynn reached into her bag once more. "I've been working on a longer piece," she said. "About that day, and everything since. I want to publish it, eventually." She handed him a typed manuscript. The first few pages bore a title, "The Quiet Edge of the River." Min accepted it with both hands. "It's not finished," Lynn said, "but I think maybe it never will be." "Not really." He understood what she meant. Some stories don't end, they ripple. That night, after closing the shop, Min sat alone under the weak glow of a desk lamp and began to read. The words unfolded gently. Lynn's voice was clear, but soft, like water shaping stone. She didn't glorify the moment. She didn't dramatize the fear. Instead, she held it with tenderness, offering the reader a chance to sit beside it, to witness, not judge. Midway through, a sentence stilled him. "We are all a little bit like rivers. We carry what we've lost. We reflect what we love. And sometimes, when someone reaches in, we let ourselves be saved." Min leaned back. The room was quiet, save for the creak of his chair and the whisper of a breeze through the cracked window. Outside, the city moved on, soft, patient, alive. The next morning, Koa found him asleep at the desk, the manuscript open across his chest. He didn't wake him. Instead, the boy made tea, swept the floor, and unlocked the door. Just like Min had taught him. Because some lessons weren't spoken, they were lived. And in the shop on that quiet morning, one boy carried the story forward. Not with words, but with the small, steady choices that form a life. Winter arrived without ceremony. The rains didn't return, but the skies grew pale, the light dimmer. Smoke curled from small cook fires in alleyways, and people walked with hands tucked deep into their sleeves, breath puffing like quiet ghosts. Min added another kettle to the back of the shop, one for tea, one for warmth. Koa now wore a second-hand wool cap that drooped over his ears, and each day he seemed more at home there, fixing chains, measuring spokes, sweeping out the dust without needing to be asked. They worked mostly in silence during the colder months, but it was the kind of silence that grows between people who trust each other, full, unhurried. One afternoon, Koa asked a question that had clearly been forming for some time. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you were too late?" Min paused mid-turn on a wrench. He didn't answer right away. The question wasn't cruel. It was honest. And from the boy's tone, it had come not from doubt, but from a need to understand how a person lives with a moment that might have gone the other way. "Yes," Min said at last. "Sometimes I think about it." He looked down at his hands. "Not often, but sometimes. The mind tries to show you the dark rooms you didn't walk into, as if it needs to prove how close the edge really was." Koa nodded, absorbing that. "Do you regret anything?" he asked. Min looked out the window for a long time. The breeze stirred the edge of the sign. Min's cycle. For repairs, for stories, for second chances. "I regret that I didn't look around sooner," he said. "That it took me longer than it should have to see what was happening. But I don't regret jumping." Koa took that in. Then he returned to oiling the gear assembly. That night, after the shop closed, Min walked to the river again. The banks were quieter now, fewer people. A soft hush blanketed everything, like the whole world was holding its breath for spring. He stood at the same spot, the same railing, hands tucked into his jacket, and slowly, as if following a rhythm older than memory, he lowered himself to sit on the ground, knees pulled up, back resting against the metal. He remembered the moment again, but not the splash, or the panic, or even the weight of Lin in his arms. What he remembered was a sound, a breath, just one, drawn and sharp and alive. The sound of someone realizing they were still here. That sound had lived with him, somewhere deep, all this time. He closed his eyes. Somewhere downriver, a motorbike buzzed across a bridge. The faint call of a street vendor echoed through the wind. But Min didn't move. He simply listened. Later, as he made his way home, he passed the small bookstore near the crossroads. A sign in the window caught his eye. Local voices, new writing from emerging authors, featuring Lin Tran. He stopped, felt something catch in his chest. Not surprise, not pride, but something more tender. He stepped inside. The shopkeeper, an older woman with round glasses and a gentle voice, smiled when she saw him. "You're him, aren't you?" she asked. He blinked. "In Lin's story," she clarified. "The river, the man." He didn't know what to say. "She came in a few days ago, left signed copies. She told me you might stop by." She reached beneath the counter and handed him a copy. Inside the front cover, Lin had written, "For the one who showed me how quiet courage can be, LT." Min ran his fingers over the page. The woman watched him carefully, kindly. "She didn't just write about what happened," she said. "She wrote about what it meant. And people are listening." Min gave her a small bow, cradling the book gently. As he walked home through the cooling air, the city shimmered faintly around him. Shop lights blinking on one by one, a dog barking in the distance, the low clatter of chopsticks against bowls from open windows. The world felt softer somehow. He returned to the shop, lit the second kettle, and sat with the book beside him, unopened. Sometimes just knowing a story exists is enough. Sometimes the telling can wait. The new year crept in with little fanfare. No fireworks, no loud celebrations near Min's shop. Just the quiet rhythm of life continuing, as if the city had chosen reflection over revelry. Koa showed up on the second morning of January with a bundle of incense and a pocket-sized calendar. "From my mother," he said. "She says new beginnings need small rituals." Min smiled, taking the gifts with both hands. He lit one stick of incense and planted it near the door. letting the fragrant smoke curl upward into the cool air. The calendar he hung behind the register, its pages clean, empty, waiting. "Any resolutions?" Koa asked, half joking. Min thought about it. "To keep showing up," he said quietly. "That seems like enough." The days passed slowly. Repairs came and went. A bent rim here, a stubborn pedal there. The shop's pace matched the season. Unhurried, careful. People brought in their bikes not just for fixing, but to stay a while, to sit in the warmth of the little shop and talk about ordinary things. The price of fish, the best banh mi in the district, a neighbor's wedding. Min listened, always listened. One afternoon, a man came in carrying an old road bike, the kind built for speed, light, and worn with years of effort. His name was Dung. He was tall, quiet, with the posture of someone who had once raced or trained hard. "I heard this place was different," he said. Min raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" "Someone told me you fix more than bikes." Min chuckled. "That depends on the bike." But Dung stayed, talking more as the repair went on. He used to ride for a local team, had medals, had dreams. Then an accident. Nothing too dramatic, but enough to leave a limp and end competition. Now he rode alone, slowly, as a way to keep the past from rusting too deep into his bones. "What keeps you riding?" Min asked. Dung looked down at the floor. "The silence," he said. "When I'm on the road, there's no noise. No voice in my head saying what I've lost." Min didn't reply right away. Instead, he handed him the freshly tightened bike and simply said, "Then ride far." Dung nodded and left. But he returned a week later, not with a repair this time, but with 2 cups of coffee and a question. "Have you ever thought about hosting a ride?" he asked. "Nothing competitive, just a circle of people who ride because they need to." Min considered that. Koa lit up. "That would be amazing. We could make a little group, give it a name." The name came easily. Vong Tron Thu Hai, the second circle. It spoke to second chances, second rides, and the quiet circles we make around the lives of others. By the end of the month, 5 people gathered at the shop's doorstep, then 10, then 17. They rode slowly through the city, through quiet back streets and riverside paths. No one led, no one hurried. It wasn't about speed, it was about presence. Sometimes they spoke, often they didn't. But each ride ended the same way. Back at the shop, where Min would boil water, pour tea, and let people sit in silence or stories as they chose. And little by little, the circle grew, not wide, but deep. People began bringing more than bikes. They brought old journals, half-written songs, letters they didn't know how to send. One woman brought a wind chime she'd made from broken spokes, hung it just outside the shop door. It sang in the breeze, a soft, metallic lullaby. "I think people just want to be near something steady," Koa said once. Min nodded. "Steady is enough." He thought of the river again, how it didn't boast or bend to the storms, how it simply kept moving, carrying everything with quiet devotion. And in that quiet current, he understood something new, that the rescue didn't end when Lin was pulled from the water. It had only begun. It was early March when Lin returned, not to the riverbank, but to the shop. The air smelled of wet earth, and the first hints of green began to appear along fences and windowsills. Spring was whispering its way in, gentle and slow, like a child waking from a long nap. Min was polishing a set of handlebars when he heard her voice. Still the best-smelling bike shop in the city. He looked up, surprised but pleased. She stepped in, carrying a cloth bag. She looked healthier, her eyes clearer. There was something lighter in the way she moved, not hurried, but purposeful. "I've come to return something," she said. From the bag, she pulled out a book, the same one Min had kept near his bedside for weeks now. Her manuscript, now bound in soft blue linen. It had been published. He held it carefully, thumbing through the pages. "You kept the title," he said. "It never stopped feeling right," she replied. "The quiet edge of the river." Min closed the book gently. "It's beautiful," he said, and meant it. Lynn lingered near the counter, watching him for a moment. Then she said, "They want me to do a reading. A small one, just here in the neighborhood. I told them I'd only do it if I could invite the man who made the story possible." Min looked up. "I don't do readings," he said softly. "You don't have to say anything." Lynn smiled. "Just be there." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to the side wall, where a faded map of the city had begun to collect pins from the second circle rides. Tiny red dots, a growing constellation of motion. He realized then how far the story had traveled, not just through pages, but through petals, through conversations shared over tea, through the quiet strength that had taken root in his shop. "All right," he said at last. "I'll come." The reading took place in a narrow room above a local cafe. Paper lanterns swung from the ceiling. A crowd of maybe 30, neighbors, riders, a few curious strangers, gathered on small stools and cushions. Lynn stood at the front with the book in her hands. She didn't start with the river. She started with a girl walking to school, headphones in, thinking about an argument with her mother. She spoke slowly, with long pauses, not for drama, but to let the weight of each sentence settle. When she finally reached the moment, the cold rush of water, the confusion, the panic, the room fell completely still. But Lynn didn't describe the rescue. She described the hands that didn't hesitate, that reached and pulled and held. And then she described the voice. It said nothing heroic, just, "I've got you." And in that moment, it was enough. Min listened with his head bowed slightly, not out of discomfort, but reverence. After the reading, people approached Lynn with praise, questions, thanks. A few came to Min too. Some shook his hand, some simply smiled and nodded. He accepted it all quietly. Back at the shop that evening, Koa was waiting. "Well," he asked, "how was it?" Min hung his jacket on the peg and smiled. It was good. Strange, but good. Koa was organizing a new set of helmets. He held one up. "You think we'll need more soon?" Min looked around. The shop had changed. More shelves, more tools, more stories pinned to the walls, but it still held its original soul, calm, steady, open. "I think we might," he said. Outside, the street was alive with the gentle energy of spring. The breeze carried music from somewhere distant. A bird, bold and unbothered, perched on the handlebars of a parked bike near the door. Min stepped outside, letting the last light of day warm his face. He thought of rivers again, how they remember everything, and how, sometimes, they give a second chance. Not just to the one pulled from the current, but to the one who reached in. By late spring, the second circle had become more than just a weekend ride. It had become a rhythm, a heartbeat that pulsed quietly through the city's quieter streets. Riders came with stories woven into their silence. Some had faced grief, others were mending invisible wounds. All found something healing in the simple act of motion. Min had started keeping a small journal by the register. Riders could write in it after each ride. One sentence, one thought, sometimes just a word. The entries were raw and honest. Today, I didn't think about the divorce. Riding with strangers made me feel less strange. I'm still here. Min read them after closing time, sitting at the counter with tea that had gone lukewarm, the scent of chain oil still on his fingers. He never wrote anything himself. He didn't need to. His words were in the air of the shop, in the worn cushions, in the tools laid out just so. One morning, a tall woman arrived with a child's bike in hand. "She doesn't ride it anymore," she said, "but it shouldn't just gather dust." Min took the bike, rusted and sun-faded, and placed it carefully in the corner. He didn't fix it immediately. Instead, he waited. 2 weeks later, a boy named Teen came in with his grandmother. He was small, soft-spoken, with one shoe slightly thicker than the other. "He's never had a bike," she said. "His legs aren't strong, but I thought maybe he could try." Min brought out the little pink bike. Teen's eyes widened. "I can repaint it," Min said gently. "We'll choose a color together." Tin chose blue, a deep ocean color, the kind that reminded Min of quiet depths. They worked on it over several afternoons. Teen watched every step, the sanding, the painting, the careful tightening of the training wheels. When it was ready, Teen took his first ride just outside the shop. It was only a few meters, slow and wobbly. But when he turned back around, cheeks flushed, eyes bright, Min saw something unmistakable. Joy, pure and unmuddied. That night, Min added a sentence to the journal. "Sometimes the smallest wheels carry the biggest hopes." Koa noticed it the next morning and said nothing, just smiled and nodded to himself. As the weather warmed, the rides began stretching farther. People suggested destinations, a forgotten shrine at the edge of the city, a mural hidden in an alley, a bakery run by a retired opera singer. Each place held a quiet magic, and each ride deepened the sense that the second circle was not about fitness or distance, but about movement toward healing, toward connection, toward meaning. One Sunday, a man named Vin joined for the first time. He rode a battered road bike and kept mostly to himself. But something in his posture spoke of weight. He was the kind of man who'd carried too much for too long. At the end of the ride, as they gathered with tea and soft music playing from a small speaker in the shop, Vin remained quiet. Then, as the others began to drift home, he approached Min. "My son drowned last year," he said plainly. Min said nothing, only looked into his eyes. "I hadn't touched the bike since," Vin continued, "but someone told me about your rides, about you." The air between them stilled. Min offered only a single sentence. "The river doesn't keep you. It teaches you to return." Vin nodded slowly, then placed his hand on the journal and wrote, "Today was the first time I didn't hate the water." Later that evening, Min returned to the riverbank. He sat beneath the same tree, watching its branches sway over the water. The light played on the surface, making it seem alive with quiet stories. A fisherman nearby cast his line and hummed an old song, off-key, content. Min stayed until the light thinned and the streetlights flickered on one by one. He thought of Lynn's voice during her reading, of Teen's first wobbling ride, of Vin's quiet surrender to hope. The river, it seemed, had sent its stories rippling outward, not to be dramatic, not to be heroic, but to be remembered. The summer brought heat, thick and humming, like a held breath across the city. The bicycles clicked and spun beneath sun-drenched trees, their shadows flickering like old film reels on the pavement. Min adjusted his schedule. Earlier openings, longer pauses in the afternoon when the light pressed down too hard. He added a small fan near the counter. Koa brought iced tea in tall glasses, always with too much mint, but always appreciated. One afternoon, a stranger arrived with a story tucked in his pocket. His name was Locke. He wore a loose shirt, sandals, and carried no phone, just a canvas bag and a folded piece of paper. "I heard about this place from someone on the train," he said, smiling as if that was reason enough. Min nodded, already sensing there was more beneath the surface. Locke pulled out the paper, a letter written years ago by a boy to his father. "It was mine," he said. "I never sent it." The letter spoke of confusion, of wanting to run away, of not understanding why a father worked late every night and never said, "I love you." It ended without anger, just a simple line. "I miss you, but I don't know how to tell you." Min handed it back without comment. Locke didn't ask him to read it aloud. He didn't explain why he brought it. He just looked around the shop, the bikes, the notes on the wall, the journal near the register, and said, "This feels like the kind of place where things find their way home." That evening, Locke joined the ride. He didn't speak much, but when they returned, he placed the letter between the pages of the journal and walked out without saying goodbye. Min left it there. Didn't read it again, didn't move it. Some things, he knew, needed to rest quietly in the presence of others. The rides continued. On a quiet Thursday, the group rode to a forgotten stone bridge outside the city. The place had the feel of something ancient, not in years, but in memory. It felt like a place people had passed through when they needed to remember who they were. Someone hung a paper lantern from a low branch. Someone else tied a piece of red thread to the railing. Each rider seemed to leave something behind. Min stood at the edge of the bridge looking out. Koa came to stand beside him. "We should make this a ritual," he said, "an annual ride." Min nodded. "We'll call it the Quiet Crossing." The name stuck, and so did the feeling. Something had shifted, from recovery to ritual, from healing to honoring. The shop, too, began to feel different. More photos went up, of riders, of quiet moments caught in motion. A small shelf of books appeared. People started leaving notes tucked into spokes on the display wall. Not to be read, just to be left. The energy inside hummed with quiet meaning. No one said it aloud, but everyone could feel it. They were part of something. Not a club, not a team. A shared understanding that to move forward didn't mean forgetting. That rescue sometimes begins with being still long enough to hear your own breath. Late one night, Min sat alone in the shop. The windows open, the streetlight casting gold across the floor. He picked up the journal. So many entries now. So many names. Some had returned dozens of times, some only once. All of them had left something behind. A line, a word, a trace. Min added his own. "I didn't save her. I just reached in. She saved herself when she chose to breathe again." He closed the book and let his hand rest on the cover. Outside, a single bicycle bell rang, faint and distant, like an echo across water, like a memory returning home. By the end of summer, a new pattern had emerged. It wasn't marked by announcements or schedules, but by the quiet flow of people drawn to the shop, not just for repairs or rides, but for something less tangible. A kind of presence, a space where silence wasn't awkward, where stillness wasn't judged, and where emotion wasn't tucked away out of politeness. Min noticed it one morning as he swept the front steps. Two women sat on the bench out front. They weren't talking. One held a thermos. The other had her eyes closed, sun on her face. They hadn't arrived together. They didn't seem to know each other. And yet, they shared the silence like old friends. Inside, the bell above the door rang. A teenager came in, shoulders hunched, headphones around his neck. "Do you fix wheels that don't belong to bikes?" he asked. Min looked up. The boy held a broken suitcase, the kind with tiny spinner wheels. "It's for my mom," he said, almost apologetically. "She's going on a trip, to see someone she hasn't forgiven yet." Min nodded. "Leave it with me." He didn't ask questions, just took the suitcase to the back and examined the wheels. Forgiveness had a sound, he thought. Sometimes it was a whisper. Sometimes it was the click of something finally rolling again. The next day, the boy returned. Min handed the suitcase back, good as new. "Tell her not to lean too hard on the left wheel," Min said. "It's strong, but it remembers." The boy nodded slowly, then handed Min a folded paper. She wrote this, "In case, I don't know, in case you wanted to know how it went." Min didn't open the letter right away. He placed it on the back counter. Let it sit there for days. Some truths bloom slowly, he believed. Like dusk bleeding into the sky. Not sudden, but sure. Later that week, Lynn returned again. This time, she brought a new story. "They want me to speak on a panel," she said, a hint of disbelief in her voice. "Writers who survived something?" Min smiled gently. "You're not a survivor. You're a witness. That's rarer." Lynn looked down, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. "Do you think people want to hear it? Again?" He paused before answering. "They don't want the story," he said. "They want to feel less alone in theirs." She let those words settle, then nodded. "I'll go." She didn't say where. Min didn't ask. What mattered wasn't the destination. It was the decision. That evening, Min rode alone. Not to the river, not toward memory, but into a part of the city he hadn't visited since childhood. Narrow alleys and aging rooftops, streetlights that flickered uncertainly. There, in a quiet park, he found an old banyan tree he used to sit under as a boy. The roots had grown deeper, the branches wider, but the sound of the wind through the leaves was unchanged. He sat beneath it for a long time, thought about the girl in the river, about the man who once felt too broken to speak, about the boy with the suitcase, about Lynn, learning to stand on a stage not as a survivor, but as someone who had returned. The banyan swayed above him like an old friend. It didn't offer wisdom, only shade. And sometimes that was enough. When he returned to the shop, the light had gone soft. Koa was there, sorting through new helmets. Min walked past him into the back room. He finally picked up the letter from the boy's mother. It was short. "He told me you didn't ask questions. Thank you. I forgave someone today. Not because they deserved it, but because I deserved to stop carrying it." Min folded it gently, placed it next to the journal. That night, he didn't write anything new, just turned off the lights, locked the door, and stood outside beneath the stars, listening to the hum of night bicycles in the distance. They sounded like memory in motion. Autumn crept in quietly, brushing the trees with the lightest hand of color. Leaves edged toward amber and crimson, falling one by one like gentle departures. The wind no longer carried the thick weight of summer, but whispered of changes, slow, inevitable. and sometimes kind. Inside the shop, Min adjusted the windows. He liked to keep the air moving, even when it carried a chill. There was something sacred about the scent of wood and metal mixed with the outside breeze. It made the space feel alive. The rides shifted with the season. More layers, slower pace, longer pauses beneath trees still holding onto their last leaves. One morning, a new rider joined. A quiet girl, no older than 12, with her father trailing behind on a rented bike. She didn't speak much, just nodded when introduced. Her name was Anne. She rode with small, tight movements, like someone taught to stay contained. Her eyes flicked everywhere, always watching, never fully arriving. Min noticed her watching the others more than the path ahead. She mimicked the way Lin adjusted her handlebars, the way Koa relaxed his shoulders on descents. At one point, on a slight hill, she stumbled. Her bike tilted sharply. Min was there in 3 steps. "Nothing broken," he said softly, helping her back up. She didn't cry, just nodded once and got back on. At the end of the ride, while others stretched or sipped tea, she stood alone near the map on the wall. Min approached quietly. "Did you enjoy it?" he asked. She shrugged. "I liked the quiet parts." He smiled. "Most people do." She looked up. "Will the leaves all fall soon?" "Yes," Min said, "but not all at once. They take their time." She seemed to like that answer. Before leaving, she placed a small folded paper into the journal. No one saw what it said. But when Min opened it later, it read, "Thank you for not asking why I didn't smile." He placed it gently between 2 pages and didn't mention it again. That week, Koa added a new note to the wall. "We ride at the speed of trust." It caught on. People started using it, not as a slogan, but as a gentle reminder, to themselves, to each other. One ride in late October stretched longer than usual. The group wound through old neighborhoods, where mango trees leaned over fences and the scent of grilled rice cakes drifted through the air. At one corner, they passed a school. A bell rang as children spilled into the yard, laughing, shouting, chasing one another beneath the gold of afternoon. Min slowed. Something caught in his chest. Not pain, exactly. Just weight. He remembered Lin as a child. Her laugh, high and bright. Her skipping feet on gravel. The way she had once called him Superman when he fixed her toy with duct tape. The memory brushed past him like wind. He let it go. That night, the shop was quiet. Koa had gone home early. Min stayed behind, cleaning up. He found a note on the counter, from a man who'd joined one ride, then never returned. "I didn't talk much, but I watched. I've been silent for over a year. Your circle made me want to speak again. Not yet, but maybe soon." Min placed the note alongside the others, not in a drawer, but along the side wall, now forming a growing mosaic of paper, handwriting, and quiet truths. Some were simple. "My father passed. I still ride because he can't." Others held more questions than answers. "Am I enough if I never get better?" The wall became known as the listening wall. Unofficial, unspoken, but sacred. No one judged the words. No one edited them. No one replied. They simply stood with them. One evening, Min caught Lin staring at the wall, eyes glazed with memory. She pointed to one note and whispered, "That one's mine." He didn't ask which one. She didn't say more. But as she left, she turned back and smiled. Not the smile of someone healed, but someone healing. That was enough. Outside, the leaves danced across the street in little spirals, carried by a wind that had traveled far. Min stood by the door, breathing in the cool night, and thought, not for the first time, that perhaps the real rescue hadn't happened in the water that day. It was happening now, in the quiet, in the circle, in the slow return of trust. The first heavy rains arrived in November. They came not as a storm, but as a long, steady weeping, the kind that blurred windows, soaked sidewalks, and turned each bicycle ride into an act of patience. Min kept the shop open. He always did, no matter the weather. The space grew dimmer, quieter. The hum of tires on wet pavement replaced the light rattle of spokes. Customers came in damp and quiet, speaking in lower voices, as if the rain had taught everyone to whisper. One evening, as Min wiped down a trail of muddy footprints near the door, an older man entered. His coat hung from him like a memory too large for the present. "I've been watching from across the street," he said, voice gravel soft, "for 3 months." Min looked up, his hands still on the towel. "And today felt right?" The man nodded slowly. "I lost my daughter, years ago, not to water, but to silence." He walked the shop slowly, fingers grazing handlebars, tires, chains, as if touching the parts of lives he could no longer fix. "She loved to ride," he said. Said the wind felt like being held. Min said nothing. The man didn't need answers, only space. Eventually, he stopped in front of the listening wall. "I have nothing to write," he murmured. "Just this ache." Min pointed to a blank paper pinned to the edge of the wall. "Then write the ache." The man did, a single line. "Some goodbyes don't echo, they just stay." He folded it, left it pinned, unsigned. Before he left, he turned back and added, "It's a beautiful thing you've made here." Min shook his head gently. "It's what people brought. I only opened the door." That night, Lynn visited again. She carried 2 candles, small and steady in glass jars. "I want to leave them by the river," she said. "Not for her, for me." Min joined her. They walked in silence to the old stone path. The river had risen with the rains. Its voice was louder now, rushing beneath the dark like breath drawn through teeth. Lynn crouched by the edge, lit the candles. "I used to blame the water," she whispered. "But it didn't pull me in. It just met me there." Min stood a few feet behind her, not intruding, only present. She set the candles adrift, and they bobbed into the current, twin lights winking between ripples. He remembered how cold the river had been that day, how sharp the current, how fragile her weight in his arms. He had carried her then. Now she stood on her own. Back at the shop, Min made tea, set out 2 cups. Lynn didn't speak much, just sat and watched the rain slide down the windows like tired prayers. Later, she picked up the journal, wrote 1 line before placing it back down. "It takes courage to stay, not just to survive." Min added no words of his own that night. Instead, he turned off the lights and sat in the hush. Outside, rain pattered against the roof in slow rhythm, like someone gently knocking from another time. Inside, everything was still. The bikes, the notes, the old scars held without shame. And in that stillness, Min felt something new. Not peace exactly, but acceptance. The kind that doesn't erase pain, only honors it. The way a river carries fallen leaves, not to forget them, but to let them move. December brought a hush over the city. The air turned crisp. Trees stood bare, their branches etched against a silver sky. Lights began to appear, not just on storefronts, but in windows, alleyways, and doorways, casting soft warmth into the cold. Min watched it all from the shop. There was less foot traffic now. Fewer bikes on the road. People retreated indoors with warm soups and thicker blankets. Yet, every so often, someone still wandered into his little corner of the world. One afternoon, a woman arrived soaked from the rain, her scarf clinging to her neck. She didn't say much, just pointed to a dented wheel and handed it over with an apologetic smile. While Min worked, she browsed the listening wall. Her fingers hovered over one of the oldest notes, then moved to a newer one. "We ride at the speed of trust." She read it aloud under her breath, barely louder than a sigh. "That's beautiful," she said. Min looked up, hands still busy. It came from someone who fell, but got back up. She didn't ask who. When the wheel was ready, she paid, then lingered near the door. "My brother drowned," she said finally, "when I was 8. She didn't wait for sympathy. He saved me first." Silence opened between them like a gate. "I forgot his voice," she added. "But when I hear bikes on wet pavement, I remember the sound of him laughing while racing downhill." Min nodded. "Some echoes live in motion." She left without taking anything from the wall, but before the door closed, she turned back. "Thank you for the quiet." After she was gone, Min poured tea for one. He'd gotten used to that. Not loneliness, just presence. He thought about the river again, how it had changed nothing and everything, how one leap made without thought had rippled into so many lives he'd never imagined. He thought about Lynn's first ride back, about An, the girl who rode silently but always showed up, about the man who watched from across the street for months before walking in, about the woman who remembered a brother only through laughter and rain. Each story folded into the next, not wrapped neatly, not resolved, but woven. One night near closing, Koa brought in a box. "Found these in the back," he said. "Photos, old ones." They spread them across the workbench. Faded prints, curled edges, bikes from another era, smiles frozen in motion. Some of Min, some of strangers. One showed a younger Lynn, maybe 7, trying to balance on a too big bike. Her mouth open in a laugh. Min just out of frame, hand barely visible holding the seat. Lynn came in halfway through. She picked up the photo and stared at it for a long time. "I don't remember this day," she said. "You laughed the whole time," Min replied. She smiled. "You were always just close enough to catch me." Outside, the wind stirred, tugging at the edges of the sky. Koa pinned one of the photos to the wall, next to the oldest note. The next day, someone added another, a black and white shot of a bridge over water. Soon, others followed. The listening wall became something more, a collage of lives held together not by answers, but by witness. Not everyone who visited rode a bike. Some came just to stand in the space, breathe in the quiet, and leave with a little less weight than they carried in. Min understood now. The rescue hadn't ended in the water. It was still unfolding, in every moment of presence, in every silence held, in every ride taken slowly. As the year neared its end, Min looked around the shop. The worn wood, the hum of gears, the smell of old grease and fresh tea, and he felt ready, not to close anything, but to begin something new. The final days of the year carried a kind of reverence. Everything seemed slower, wrapped in quiet reflection. Streets were softer with light, conversations gentler. Even the sky, overcast and wide, seemed to breathe more deeply. Min arrived early on the last morning of the year. The shop felt still, as if it too was pausing to remember. He walked through it slowly, touching the handlebars of a newly tuned bike, brushing dust from the corners of the old tea shelf, straightening a note that had curled at the edge on the listening wall. He didn't open the shutters right away. Instead, he brewed tea and sat in the center of the room, facing the bikes, the wall, the silence. When Lynn came in, hair tucked into a scarf, cheeks flushed from the cold, she didn't speak. She didn't have to. She just set a bundle down on the counter, freshly baked bonbon, still warm. For a long while they sat, drinking, eating, watching the light shift slowly through the window panes. Koa arrived next, then Anne and her father, the woman who once spoke of her brother, the quiet man with the heavy coat. One by one, they stepped into the shop. No invitation sent, no plan made, only presence. By noon, nearly a dozen people were gathered, some sipping tea, others polishing bikes, a few reading the listening wall. Lynn played a soft playlist from her phone, songs that felt like memory and hope folded together. Someone brought a thermos of ginger tea. Someone else brought paper and pens. No one declared it, but a small ceremony formed, one of slow repair, of gentle honoring. People took turns adding to the wall. This time, not just notes, but drawings, photos, lines from poems. Min added a single sentence, 1 leap, 100 ripples. Koa placed a Polaroid of the group, not posed but candid, taken just moments before. In it, Min wasn't centered. He was to the side, laughing at something Lynn had said, unaware the photo was even taken. A moment caught in honesty. When the sky began to darken, no one rushed to leave. They lingered, folding up blankets, rinsing cups, touching shoulders gently in farewell. Before she left, Lynn stood at the door, looking back once. She didn't speak, but her eyes said it clearly. "Thank you for catching me." Min nodded once. Outside, the river flowed as it always had. Not heroic, not cruel, just constant. Min walked there as the last light faded. He stood at the same spot where he had jumped in, months ago now, but carried still in every step since. He didn't need to relive it. He simply let the wind wrap around him, let the scent of cold water and stone rise. Then he whispered softly, "Thank you." Not to the river, not to fate, but to the girl who returned, to the boy who still jumped, to the people who stayed. He turned back toward the shop, lights now glowing softly behind the window panes. Not waiting for anyone, just ready. Ready for the next knock on the door, the next broken wheel, the next story carried in silently, waiting for space. Min knew now that being a hero wasn't in the leap alone. It was in the staying, in the showing up, in the quiet. And as the year ended, the shop stood like a lantern in the dusk. Not loud, not proud, but open, always open. There are stories that echo across nations. Some roar, others whisper. This one began with a single leap, a man stepping into cold water without thought, drawn by something deeper than fear. But it didn't end there. Because rescue is rarely a moment, it's a movement, a ripple that touches the lives of people far beyond what the eye can see. In that quiet riverside shop, what began as instinct became something enduring, a space of return, of remembering, of release. People came, not just for bikes, but for belonging. They came with grief, with laughter, with stories that had waited too long to be heard. They left notes, photos, fragments of themselves, and in return, they found what all of us seek in some way or another. A place that doesn't ask you to be whole, only present. This was not a tale of fame. There were no flashing lights, no headlines, no medals. Just a man who jumped, and then stayed. Through the seasons, through the silences, through the slow work of being human together. At One Hero a Day, we honor the truth that heroism wears many faces, and often, the quiet ones are the most enduring. If you felt something while listening to this, carry it forward. Leave space for someone else's story. Hold silence where it matters, and never underestimate the weight of presence. Until tomorrow night, be well, be kind, be near.